In today's video, we're going to be taking a look here at this modeled guidance. As always, I'm going to be straight up with you guys. It does look like we're heading into a quieter pattern here for most of my viewers, which is most of the US population, which is mostly from the center point eastward. The West looks to be quite active. We are going to talk pretty extensively about you guys out there as well, but the East, it's looking to be a little bit less activity moving forward. This is actually a little bit outdated. This was overnight. We could see that cold front coming through, and we can see that this jet stream is pretty much doing this at this point. So this cold air is rushing in with that cold front, and it is going to be colder. I know that because it's 10 a.m. right now and it's already 45 degrees here, and it was like 70 yesterday. So definitely a huge difference after this cold front comes through. And again, look, much quieter out east. I mean, there's nothing going on out here, but look out west. We do have this storm system moving onshore already. This is by the time we're reaching about 2 a.m. here on Monday, March 20th, just a couple of days from now. And we can see that there is some snowfall in the higher elevation regions, including the Sierra Nevadas, Cascades, Rockies here taking place. But your more valley regions are seeing more and more rainfall as we actually get deeper into the spring here. That's something I've noticed has been changing very drastically. We can see that by the time we're reaching about Tuesday morning time frame, let's call it about 10 a.m. depending on which time zone you're in, the Rockies here dealing with some snowfall, and we can see another storm system moving in. This one is a little bit further south actually. Most of ours have been moving in through the northwest, but as you can see, I'm going to just X that out because we basically have a storm moving in now from the southwest, which is going to be a big change for pretty much what we've seen recently. And what this does is, look, we basically have a flatter jet stream here. I mean, it's a little bit troughy and ridgy, but, you know, not that bad. But what this is going to do is we'll immediately see a little bit of a trough in the west develop because of this storm. And this allows for things to ridge up pretty quickly because we know low pressure systems like this have warm fronts and then cold fronts. So what's going to happen is this cold is going to pour in behind. And what that basically does is throws off the balance, which allows this warm air to move up the east because of all that troughing happening in the west. We've talked about how the west is almost always upstream in these weather situations. So what happens in the west dictates what happens in the east. Much more than what happens in the east dictates what happens in the west. What happens in the east almost does not control anything to do with the weather in the west. It's mostly from west to east what we're seeing. Now, as we just move on with this, we can see that this storm does weaken, but what we see is that one kind of moves up. It brings some precipitation up here to these pockets, but what we see is another low developing, and it already has some good structure. Clearly a warm front, cold front already developing. Pretty soft, but it is 1,003 millibars, so we can't expect this to be like the worst storm of all time, right? But we can see that this thing is really developing pretty quickly. It drops all the way from 1,003 down to 992 within probably 12 hours. So it is rapidly developing. We are seeing this warm surging air here. This is by Friday into Saturday, 24th into 25th. We can see the cold front with cold air. And really, this looks like a premium severe weather setup. I guess it's a little bit of a positive word there. I don't know. A bad severe weather setup, really, because this just looks pretty intense, and this storm is intensifying quickly. We go from 1,003. Let's see, that's at 60. Down to about 986. So we're dropping nearly 20 millibars here. That's pretty close to bombogenesis territory. So this is a rapidly intensifying low here. And this cold front, warm front signal is even stronger by this point. About Saturday morning hour here on the 25th. So we'd be watching all of these pockets for our next big severe weather event, unfortunately, with that underneath cold front. And look, to the north, we have some wintering activity here to mention. And then out west, we're left with some snowfall because still the balance of things looks more like this. Still more ridging in the east, more troughing out west, as you can see. That low lifts off before we get much for the southeast. So these areas are going to be a little bit quieter, as you can see. That really weakens as it approaches the coast, and this actually becomes a pretty major snowstorm for New England and Canada here by the time we're reaching close to Sunday. And then we see some cold air move in and even a coastal low here on this model. Take this with a grain of salt as this is at hours 240, but we could have another similar New England snowstorm here. very late on the model, but I would not be surprised if this changes. And I mean, the jet stream setup is pretty good here. This is what I'm kind of not hoping for because I'm just done with the cold, honestly. But that is what this model is showing. Now let's go ahead and take a look here at our total precipitation, and as you can see, we do have this precipitation moving onshore to these areas here. Again, we have the initial storm more for the northwest, and this brings snowfall to multiple different areas. And then storm number 2 here does move in through the southwest, and that is what brings most of that precipitation down there. As always, the Rockies kind of break up a lot of this, and we see drier conditions over a lot of the plains. But we see this redevelop in here, especially with that very strong low at the end of the model run. That rapidly intensifying one, and we would be watching for severe weather in most of these areas underneath that I'm kind of crisscrossing here. Maybe not that far eastward, but mostly for Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, perhaps maybe into South Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri. That's kind of a big maybe. But it looks like a classic, deeper south severe weather event just like this. But we need to wait and see. This does look pretty interesting, but it also looks very intense. So I want to really take this quite seriously because it could be a very, very serious event. Now, total snowfall here, as you can see, is a lot quieter outside of just the Rockies, Cascades, and Sierra Nevadas. These areas typically see snowfall well into April in pretty high quantities. And we are seeing things slow down here for the upper Midwest and northern plains, Great Lakes, outside of Michigan here, where we get quite a bit of snowfall with that low later on. We're going to take that with a grain of salt as well, because only time will be able to tell. Really, that is a little bit later. And also, we get that low at the very end of the model run developing here offshore of New England, bringing some snowfall to these areas as well. Again, also taking that with a grain of salt, maybe even more so in this case, because it is a very, very kind of rare event for this time of year, late March, and also it's very late in the model run as well. So there's multiple things working against this. Not to say that it's impossible, but there is multiple things working against it. Now, the GFS model we're going to compare here. We can see that trough in the east, ridge in the west. We see pretty much the same thing take place. We see this rapidly intensifying low around Friday, Saturday timeframe with the cold front, warm front. The agreement so far this spring on these two models has been really, really good, and that usually means that the models are doing better when they're both on the same page, and that is a lot of what we've seen over the past maybe month or so. We've seen much better things from these models, whereas in December, January, and February, it was some of the worst I've ever seen, reminiscent of the 2010s, early 2010s, when the technology just wasn't the same. We see that break up, and this is where I get really interested, because this is around when we saw the European model showing nothing, but we see this snowfall in here, cold front underneath, a little bit of a warm front perhaps, and we see warm air rushing up the east coast here again in this case. This is when we would be watching for that coastal low, and actually, look at that, at hours 2:40, we have a coastal low here with snowfall in very similar areas. I will take this back one frame there, and compare, but I mean, this is crazy. So 996 right there. Let's take a look at that European model again, and maybe 50 miles difference. 240 hours out, we maybe have 50-mile difference and maybe a 5 millibar difference. Actually, exactly a 5 millibar difference. No, but anyway, a little bit of difference intensity there, but I mean, that is crazy, guys. That is crazy to see that resemblance that far into the model run. I am curious to see. I haven't seen this yet because I usually just go, I view it with you guys. I really don't look at this stuff too far ahead. I look a little bit just to get the general idea of what the video is going to be like, but I have not seen this. Let's keep going. And we see that what we get is more of these lows working their way over top, it appears. Cold front here, warm front right there, and again, we have rushing warm air. These are more like those 1 to 2 days of very unseasonably warm temperatures, followed by cold, like we just had just over the past 2 days. That is what you're looking at here mostly, because we see the cold air rush in. And again, another low trying to work its way over the top here, maybe a little bit more of a sharp increase, and that would cause widespread and much more long-lived warmth here. And it appears like the more we work our way into this model run, the more we see the cold air rushing into the west, We see the warm air rising up once again in the east. Definitely a sign of more spring-like weather on the way on both models we've viewed here today. I am excited. I'm more excited for the warmth than I am for the cold at this point. I'm pretty much over it. No snowfall this winter for me. I saw flakes actually one day in January. There was some flurries flying. That is it. So I am with you guys. A lot of you guys that have not seen snowfall this year, I am suffering just as much. So I'm ready for spring, in other words. I hope you guys are as well, because it is on the way, and we are going to be tracking all of this every single day, make sure nothing changes here. So tune in with us daily. We do upload every single day, like I said. Be sure to subscribe. You can even hit that bell icon for daily notifications when we upload, so you never miss one. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next video.